I'll go ahead and I'll continue. So the other nice thing that's here is I can easily go in and say maybe I want to request some overtime. I can easily add an activity. So I can select, my overtime activity, put in when I want to work, when I want that overtime to start. Or maybe it's a requesting a Saturday off where I'm not scheduled, or Sunday where I'm not scheduled, and I want to come in and I want to add my time off here. So you can come in and easily add, work requests, time off requests, anything in between. And these activity codes themselves, these are all customizable. So you come in, you create these activity codes. These activity codes can be directly mapped to agent states, so unavailable states and so forth to track adherence and so on with those as well. But very easy. You can add comments associated to those and so forth. So from that kind of day-to-day activity, it's very easy to come in and request changes and times off from those standard users. And I can even see a list of my requests off, whether they're pending, whether they've been canceled for some reason or approved or what have you from there. And then we also can throw in things like shift bidding. So I can easily come in here and see, are there any available shifts for me to bid? So in this case, I see I've got a shift bid here for a date range, and I can easily select that shift or that bid, and I can go through and I can choose what part of this that I want to and submit that bid. And based off of maybe it's specific metrics or seniority or some other means where maybe you have a ranking associated to it, because within the user profiles you can set up a rank associated to that individual. Maybe you use those types of things to determine who gets that bid for that day.
So
But
I got a question for Adam
Mhm.
here. Adam, what's your thoughts as far as how this may tie into ADP?
That's what we're waiting to see.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, as far as tying into ADP, I'll address that right now. There isn't a direct integration into ADP with this workforce management solution. What we do is we do have the ability to export the activity states, have those marked as whether they're paid activities or not paid activities, and actually provide a payroll API for that purpose. We are still in the process of building out more and more APIs to open it up for things like those direct integrations, but at this time we do not have a direct integration in with ADP from that perspective.
Where are they at on the roadmap?
I'd have to confirm and find out. I thought it was going to be later on this year, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't heard about that here recently. So that's something we can follow with the product managers and see where we stand with the integration
It was
capabilities.
supposed to be fourth quarter release. So even if worst case if that pushes me, it might go into Q1 of next year. I remember looking at that not too long ago.
Thanks, Dan. All right. So that's just your regular user. Very easy. I've got everything right here that I need to view my calendar. Like I said, we can do it on an app, any of those things kind of in between. From here, what I was going to jump into is kind of the day in the life of the manager themselves, somebody who's actually using this data to digest what's going on in the contact center, everything from a few real-time dashboards and widgets that we have all the way over to things like checking who's currently in adherence, who's out of adherence, and so on and so forth. Before I migrate over, are there any questions kind of about just the standard user capabilities?
I don't think so.
All right. So within our dashboards, if you remember these from the previous demo, we've got a lot of options with these, but in this case, we've got the 4 across the top that are directly related to workforce management. And what they're doing is they're actually tracking things like average handle time, average speed of answer, your service levels, and your volume against the forecasts that were created for the data that you're looking at. So you can come in and you can actually filter these down to the skills that you would like to. You can either use the target from the forecast, or maybe you want to set a manual target because maybe the forecast itself is your minimum value, and you want to adjust that or view maybe on a holistic instead of maybe individual skills. Since I'm looking at 3 skills here, maybe you add some additional capabilities there. You can also set a deviate. So this is going to give you kind of some leeway, and as you see, it kind of color codes your below target, above target, within target, or within forecast, and so on. So you can also go through, and the skills that you're selecting here, these are all your skills that you're using to schedule. So in this case, I've got these 3 skills, but I could choose any number of skills or any combination of skills that I would want within these dashboards. I could even set an individual dashboard and just have a single, or sorry, within the widget, and have a single dashboard that is every skill that we have and monitor each skill independently. It really is completely up to you on how you would want to get these configured, because it's a very easy drag and drop environment. You can move things around. It's fluid. You can resize widgets if you choose to. And as we select these, it'll actually pull down and kind of see where your numbers are within that and why you're out of adherence and so on and so forth. Adding widgets is very easy, where I can just come in here and I can pull down each one of these and create really as many as I need to. So that's one side of kind of the real-time information or near real-time view for your workforce management aspects of things. The next is actually going to be underneath the workforce management tool itself within the platform. And again, this is a unified suite. So everything that I'm showing you is within the same user interface. I'm not jumping between one system or the other system. When I create my users, I'm creating them in one place, and they're just going to be automatically available everywhere else. So within the workforce management tool itself, this is where I can get in to view my schedule. So I have mine filtered down to my two agents on my team, but maybe I wanted to view everybody in the system. So now I can get a better view of what maybe this might look like if you're looking at more than 2 people's schedules. A couple things to point out in this. First off, the little green and the orange bars and so forth, those are your various activities that are typically mixed in with, say, your open shifts or your inbound shifts or whatever you would want to label the main activity that your agents are going to be doing for that day. And on top of that, the forecast itself that was used when we created this schedule, we're using a net staffing threshold that's configured for this day. And that's what those light green and dark green boxes and so forth that you see throughout the schedule are. So I know by looking at this, the darker green that is, the more coverage I have for that time frame. And these are broken down into 15-minute intervals. So each little box you see is a 15-minute interval. If it's red, that means actually I'm understaffed. So if I wanted to, you should be able to move these around and kind of see how things are going to adjust based off of those time frames. So as I move schedules around, we're going to see various things pop up in red that weren't red before and so forth. The other nice thing is with this filter is you can filter this by everything from the scheduling unit or maybe skills. So one example I like to bring up is if you have people that have that speak Spanish and you have Spanish speaking skills, you can use this filter down and say, okay, do I have enough coverage for my Spanish skills for the day? Do I have enough coverage for a specific department and what have you? So we have multiple ways to filter down the schedule so that you can check specific aspects for that day to make sure you have coverage.
Couple questions while we're looking at this, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So I see breaks and lunches on there. Is there a way to automatically stagger those for your employees, or is that a manual adjustment?
No, absolutely. So the system itself, and when we get into some of the configurations of this, when we create those, what we call daily rules, you set up that capability. So you give a relative start dates and within this time frame. And what the system will do is look at your forecasted call volume and automatically assign the breaks so that they're in the most effective time. So that way you don't have 7 agents going out and break all at the same time, and then you have nobody on the phones. So that is something that you can do manually and force breaks to be at specific times all the time, or you can let the system kind of pick the best time based off of your forecast. So
Perfect.
good question.
And then
Yeah.
I see in your left-hand nav there, I see import staffing plan. Is that
Yes.
something? Walk me through that real quick, because we do pretty good forecasting on our own over here based on business.
Yeah, this just gives you the ability to manually import data if you choose to. So you'll have a little template here that you can download, and if you want to create a manual staffing plan, you can. But most of the time, our customers are actually using our forecast to automatically generate that forecast. But we do give you that ability to manually import data if you choose to.
Great.
So another fun thing that's about this, and it kind of goes right along with what you were asking, Adam, regarding the breaks, is I can come in here and do a meeting scheduler. So say I need to schedule, say, one-on-ones or a one-off coaching with everybody on my team. Well, I can come in here, choose the duration, choose that activity, and then I can say, is it going to be a fixed time or flexible time? And if I do flexible time, I can say, you know what, don't schedule more than one simultaneous employee. We need to get these meetings scheduled between this date and this date. I choose the employees that meeting gets added to, maybe any comments. And then the system itself, when I hit schedule, will actually identify the best time through those agents' forecast and schedule to associate that coaching or that meeting to. Now you can also include those meetings and so forth in with your schedule or your daily rules. That's more of your one-off scenarios where maybe it's a additional meeting than your standard one-on-ones or what have you. The other thing we can do very neatly or very nicely is copy. So say you love this schedule, this is a schedule that you use all the time. You don't necessarily want to have to go through and rerun forecasts and generate new schedules over and over again. You can actually copy and duplicate the schedule out pretty quick. Net staffing threshold, this might be different. So the forecasted is going to be the same. So your forecast is your forecast. But maybe in your world, if we're short 2 agents, that's a huge deal. Or maybe if you're short 10 agents, that's a big deal. Or maybe you're over 2 or 10. This is just a little slide rule. So you see how the color kind of changes and extends that based off of how I have that set. So you can kind of adjust what your preferred staffing threshold is for your group of agents that you're viewing the schedule for. And then finally, the time off management. So you do have the ability to take time off and put in time off requests, as you saw from the other screen with the My Zone for the users themselves. And as long as those time off requests are approved before the schedule gets generated, it's going to automatically take those into account. But you do have the ability to come in and say somebody calls off. You can select that agent, choose why they're calling off. Maybe they go home sick, maybe it's an early leave, what have you, and do that. Or you can do it right from here. So I can copy this shift and maybe paste it for somebody else. And then maybe I want to add comments in here covering for so-and-so. And then the other person, I can come in here and I can edit the shift and change that type to, paid time off, or maybe they called off sick. So you can make those manual adjustments, leave comments, so that way when you go back and you view this schedule at a later date, you know why certain people have called off or work shifts that they weren't originally scheduled for.
So as a general rule, we allow 10% of our staff off for TORs. Is there a way to put that in here and it auto approve TORs for us?
Yeah, so there are rules. So you can set up approval rules. So these approval rules can be everything from, paid time off based off of see if I can break somebody else's here. So you have conditions. So in this case, if they have a daily balance of at least 1 and so forth, you can also base it off of net staffing thresholds, but you do have some varying automation that you can set up for those approval rules. So you're not having to go in and actually do everything manually.
Great.
Oh, good question. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. I want to follow with your guys' questions and then kind of get back into my flow of things. So as far as the schedule manager itself goes, managing that schedule after it's created, are there any other questions about this screen itself that maybe I didn't touch on and you're curious about?
Can we enter individual exclusions for employees? I'm thinking of our students who have times they can't work.
Absolutely. So that you have the ability to update your shift preference through MyZone. But for instance, if I pull up myself here, so I don't break anybody else, when you create the users in the system, this is where not only do you assign them to your scheduling unit, what skills they're to be scheduled with, but I can come in and I can set my availability. So if I can't work Tuesdays, I just select Tuesday all day, and the system itself will go out and look and say, look, I know they can't work on Tuesdays. And then you have your preferences on top of that.
Cool.
And the availability will guarantee not to schedule them during that time. The preferences, I understand you like to have Saturdays off, but we need you to work Saturday tough. That's kind of the difference there between the two.
So if somebody puts in a time off request after the schedule is made, how does it alert you?
So as a manager, you're going to be alerted with the notifications up here. And then there's also the ability to have like email notifications. So for instance, if my schedule changes, I'm going to get an email notification saying, hey, your schedule changed. But you see here, I have new time off request notifications here that would pop up, and then I can jump directly into those time off requests, approve, deny. And when you do that, it takes you right into that screen, and then you can kind of view that date, that time. You can view that in the actual scheduler to see if you even have the bandwidth to give that person that time off or what have you. And the same thing with shift trades. Now, the nice thing with the shift trades is it does require the person that I am requesting my shift to be traded with to approve it before it even gets sent to a manager. Because if I'm trying to trade my shift with Loomis and he can't trade my shift, what's the point in asking the manager if we can do the trade? Because the person themselves didn't approve it. So looks like we need to get caught up on some of these. But if I wanted to just hop into the scheduler, it just pops open and it jumps, and you see these quick links. It follows. It takes you around into those aspects of the calendar, allows you to view that information. I don't have to go hunt and find my way through the platform. It just automatically directs you through those various links.
I would assume these notifications to managers, really to the management team. So if Megan is off today, whoever can do it can go ahead and see that.
Correct.
As well.
Pretty.
Okay.
Yep. Anybody in the system who has permission to that aspect of the platform will be notified, or to that group or what have you. So.
And that permission or that group can be linked to a Active Directory role group?
No, it's going to be a permission set up directly within CX1 because all of the permissions in the system are granularly based directly off of configurations within CX1. All right. So moving on to kind of the next step of the day in the life of for your supervisors, we have the ability to look at adherence. So I can either, again, we have those filters, so I can filter down by scheduling units, so I'm not looking at everybody in the system or groups or specific skills, but I can come in, I can see who they are, how long they've been out of adherence, what their scheduled activity is, what their actual activity is, and how long they've been in those various states. We can generate an adherence report from this. But as you'll see in the historical reporting, we have a very good kind of BI plot graph that allows you to go in and not only see who are your contenders for the worst adherence, but also what activities actually cause the most trouble with adherence and so on. So you got a couple different ways to view your adherence here. And then from the intraday aspect, so this is going to be your forecasting, your reforecasting. How am I doing against the historical information? So right off the bat, I've got my volume here so I can see where I'm at from everything from a total forecast to an abandonment. It shows me my new variants, how many actual contacts that I've handled compared to how many were forecasted. And this kind of carries over to things like, now I can see how many people should be scheduled compared to how many people are scheduled. So if my call volume is low, this will tell me exactly how many people I need to kind of maintain on that current path of how we're forecasting our information. And this is also broken down into kind of 15-minute increments. So as you can see throughout the day, my numbers change as long as the forecast remains consistent, or the call volume stays consistent.
I see
Then you
abandonment.
Yes.
I see abandonment in there, but did this take into account time service factor as well?
Okay, time service factor. What metric is that showing you? What value? Because we may reference
Speed.
that something.
Speed to answer.
Yeah, so average speed to answer is
Yeah.
over here as well.
Okay, I didn't see
Yeah,
it. Thank
sorry.
you.
No, you're fine. I had to make sure I was going to reference the right one for you. Appreciate that. And then your service levels are also taken into account here as well. So, and then you can add various columns to these. You can control the metrics that you see. So, and then everything has an export capability. I can jump around and view historical dates. So lots of good information on this, especially when you're trying to make sure, you know, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing as far as from a forecast perspective? So from a day in the life of kind of real-time tools, those were it. The rest of the platform is going to be walking through things like, how do I set up my schedules? You know, how do those daily rules get put together? How do those forecasts get put together? One nice thing you'll see here when I get in the forecast is we can forecast for digital channels alongside of voice channels. You can do things independently. You can group skills together. You have a lot of flexibility with how you build out those forecasts. So that's the next direction I was going to jump into, just kind of following down the left-hand side menu there. But were there any questions from what is on this screen or anything that I've shown you up to this point that you guys would like to ask before I move on?
Carry on.
All right. So I'm not actually going to generate a forecast, but I am going to bring you into a forecast that I've already generated just to give you an idea. So you can see here, there's no real limit to the amount of forecasts that you can have ran. So you can have different forecasts for different groups. Like for instance, I created a Crosby team forecast that there's only 2 people, so I don't have a whole lot of data in there, but you can kind of get the idea. So this is kind of starting at the end, just to kind of let you know, as this goes through, it's going to spit out these bar graphs throughout the way that you can export to CSV. Maybe I want to compare my what if scenarios, compare my alternative scheduling. I can choose by scheduling units or skills. If I'm scheduling for multiple skills, I can break this down and unselect or select all. So there's a lot of different ways you can view your information. So I'm going to go back to the beginning here and show you how we got to this point. So within your forecast itself, you can choose your historical time period. 2 years is the limit, simply because we find that if you go beyond 2 years, data really isn't consistent anymore. It's very your patterns and your ebbs and flows kind of seem to start getting very different when you get past that 2-year mark, just with the way things change. So you have that 2-year historical time period, which you can select. You have multiple forecast time periods. Maybe you want to do a year, 6 months, 3 months, 3 weeks. So you got a lot of flexibility there. And then you choose your dates, what you want that increment to be in for that forecast, your pattern breakdown. And then this is where you can manually choose your staffing parameters for every forecast, but we give you the ability to create what we call a forecast profile. So say, for instance, I'm scheduling for the same group of agents and the same skills every time. Well, I don't want to have to come in here and manually select my parameters for every single forecast I run. I just want to use the same container of information, but forecast it against different or new or more recent data. So that's what I've done here is I have my forecast parameter or my staffing parameters predetermined. And now we kind of move on throughout the data here. It's going to give you warnings saying, hey, you don't have a whole lot of data in here, so this might not be the most accurate forecast, but it'll allow you to kind of view your historical information and go, you know what, that looks about right. You know, from a call volume perspective, average handle time perspective, I can kind of see what that information is going to look like. And again, throughout the way, you can always export these to CSVs. You can show graphs by just a general ability or by skill, allowing you to kind of pick and choose. Because again, we are an omni-channel platform. So we allow you to schedule inbound voice, inbound email, SMS, and chat all under the same schedule. So that way you're not over scheduling agents based off of the channels that they're all working. And then we get into the forecast, and it's the same kind of thing here, where does this forecast, how does this look? Do we have any outlier? And yeah, I don't have any outliers here, but if there was an outlier day, you'd see a big green bar sticking up. So typically always happens around Christmas, where we would see I'm not there yet. A bar there saying, hey, you know what, your traffic on this day doesn't fit the pattern of the rest of your call volume. So you may have something going on here. And it's just to let you know, hey, you may want to look at this. So it gives you just kind of that initial warning. You can also, if you know that your call volume is going to be different going into a forecast, we do allow you to put in special days. So you can add a special day. So, you know, for instance, for Christmas or for Thanksgiving, if you're closed and you're not expecting a call volume that day, you can actually tell the system just automatically don't account for any call volume this day. Or, hey, we have a promotion going on and we're expecting a higher call volume that day by, you know, hopefully 25% or what have you. You can add in those one-offs so that the forecast happens automatically. Or I can come in here and kind of adjust things as I need to kind of make sure. Now this forecast has already been used to schedule, so it's not saving those changes. But then I can come into my alternative and I can do the same kind of thing where if I wanted to view those pieces of information and kind of compare my changes compared to my my other changes, I can compare them. And then I can also view this information kind of from a graphical form. So, or not graphical, but a spreadsheet or value ability where I can come in and kind of see what these values are and manually make changes this way if it's a little bit better than adjusting kind of the points there. And you can do bulk actions as well. So if you want to adjust all days by the same aspect, you can do it this way as well.
When we pick up this solution for the first time, I'm assuming we can import a bunch of historical data so that it has something to work off of.
Yep. You can import historical data, just kind of like the staffing plans themselves. You get a little CSV file that tells you what format we need the data in so we can ingest it. And then we just would import that data so you've got information day one. So yes.
Awesome.
Yep. So once you've determined which one of these forecasts you want to go with, we'll go with into the parameters, which is that next step. So in this case, I've got 4 different skills that I'm scheduling for. So my chat might have different parameters than say my voice. So I come here, I've got some different service levels. I've got maybe some different shrinkage levels for Sundays or different days of the week for this, simultaneous call handling. So this is something that's very unique within CX1 is we have about 40 some algorithms that are running in the background to give you your best case schedule. And those algorithms are actually taking into account if agents can work more than one contact at the same time. So for instance, if I can handle a voice call and 2 chats at the same time, or 2 chats and a text at the same time, what have you, I can come in here, configure that, and the schedule itself, when it's output, it's not going to add an individual person for each one of those channels. It's going to say, hey, one person can handle these channels. And you can go through and do the same thing for voice, different SLAs, different handling requirements, skills for outbound dialing. So I don't know if you guys have the need, but if you have any kind of automated outbound dialer needs where you want the system to dial a list of calls for your agents in an automated fashion, we can also include those contacts in here. So in this case, it's taking into account that I've got 150 calls that need dialed with these based on percentages over this time frame, and we're going to call between this time and this time. So it's going to use all of this information to help facilitate the best case for my schedule. And inbound email. And what's fun about email is it knows that email is typically a deferrable work because there's not somebody live expecting a response within seconds. So your SLAs maybe be handled different. You might have different requirements from a simultaneous handling perspective. So in this case, I want to answer 100% of my emails within 6 hours, and so on. So it's going to take that into account differently with the schedule itself, and then SMS and so on. So you have that ability to really get down and customize those service levels and those parameters on a per skill basis, and still have the system schedule all of those skills for the same forecast for the same group of agents. And then I do my generate staffing, and we run and create the schedule, and we get back to that scheduling manager that we started with at the beginning.
When it says answered within 6 business hours, I assume we can set that up as to, what our business hours are, and it's like, Christmas Day, we don't consider that business hours. Can you factor all of that into there?
Yeah, and actually, as far as your business hours and so on and so forth, you have various hours of operation that can be assigned on a per skill basis, or you also have a general business unit, so a global setting for your hours. But this will actually tie into more of your daily and weekly rules and scheduling units and so forth as well down here on how those schedules are put together. So the agents that are a part of this schedule are all going to be configured with a daily and weekly rule. Maybe that daily rule is they work 8 hours. Well, it's going to make sure and take into account, okay, they might be working for 8 hours, but within that 6 hours, we want all of those emails to be handled. And that's an adjustable figure too. And you even have the ability to choose whether or not you want to resolve all those actions in the same day or let them roll over. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good question. All right, I know we got about 18 minutes left. The big things are kind of what I've shown you and gone into the forecast. And I know, Adam, you were asking some things about some breaks and how those can be scheduled. So I was going to open up a daily rule. But were there any other questions regarding forecasting, how the forecasting works, maybe comments, anything along those lines before I move on?
I have a quick question. So we have some tasks that aren't generating an interaction. So like we do some invoice holds, that type of thing. Can we factor that into our forecast? So it's like we know we need one extra person for this other task over here, but it's not linked to a queue necessarily.
Absolutely. So what I'll do, and to help with that question, I'll start with the ACD activity mapping. So I mentioned you can create as many activity custom codes as you would like. Well, all of those activity codes, they may not map to an ACD event. So you see here where we have various states, We have the event reasons, which would be your unavailable code from the ACD perspective. So any of these activity codes that you see that aren't directly mapped to an event ID or reason, we have the ability to schedule for those, but not account those directly to necessarily the agent itself. So what I can do is I can come in here, I create my activity code. I just don't map that activity code to an ACD event. It's just going to be an activity code that we have created. And then when I do my daily rules, when I create my new rule, I can choose the default shift type. So that's just in general what that's going to be. And what we have along with those is we actually now we can associate this. So maybe that's their general, shift type, but maybe there is, back office email involved, and that back office email is for, 1 hour. We'll just leave it there. And then this is where I was talking about that relative start date. Let's, they're going to either start that right at the beginning of their shift, or maybe, let's start about 2.5 hours into their shift. And then I can choose, I either want that to start exactly 2.5 hours into their shift, or, anywhere between 2 and 3 hours, and you can add a slack to it. And then you can do a new activity rule. And maybe this one is, break. So maybe that break is 15 minutes, and you see it defaults to lengths. So when you create these activity codes, you can actually set up some additional things to make it a little easier for you. And then maybe this starts, 2 hours into their shift, and then so on and so forth. So what it's going to do is it's going to take these activity codes, it's going to compile them together, and you choose your shift length. So maybe you have part-time shifts, maybe you have full-time shifts, your shifts between. So this would go into when they're doing this pieces of this stuff. So in essence, you could choose a back office email daily rule that starts at specific times of the day. And then you assign, whatever you would there from that aspect. So you can have multiple activities rolled into one, or you can just create a single daily rule for a single activity. And then once you get these created, you can say, I need the start time increment will use the forecast and say, anybody that's a part of this daily rule, based off the forecast, let's bring them in 15-minute increments so that I'm scheduling the most effective way possible. So really just depends on how you want to create these rules. And then what will happen is when you get into the weekly rules themselves, and I'll jump into one that I've already got created here. Here we go. You start compiling those daily rules. So now I can select a daily rule. So maybe that daily rule is, back office email or whatever that would be. And I would add that on there, and that's for 2 hours. Well, what it's going to do is, because that's not mapped to a skill or anything along those lines, kind of like a break or a lunch or coaching, it's going to find the best time throughout their day to schedule that activity, so that way it's not affecting your call volume on the phones. So I know that kind of was meant to handle 2 questions at the same time there. Does that make sense regarding how you could? Okay. And then Adam, does that help with your question about the breaks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And then you can also have fun and rotation rules. So I know you guys talked about shift bidding for maybe weekend shifts and so on and so forth. We also have customers that rotate. So maybe you want to rotate people every other Saturday or every other Sunday for that. You can actually build in those rotation rules, and then the bidding templates themselves are going to be very similar to those weekly rules, or where you kind of build out that weekly rule, and you create kind of what days that would account for. So maybe that's for Saturday and Sunday or what have you. And then you save that out, you assign what employees can be associated to that shift bid template, and then you actually will initiate that via the bidding manager. and it will pass that out among whatever agents that are associated to that bidding template itself. Then you can also assign seat limits, which is, I know, always a question that comes up, because maybe you have different lines of business that have a set amount of employees, and you don't want to have the system schedule more employees than what you have that work that line of business. So you could have, for instance, a customer service with 20 employees, a sales with 30 employees, and so forth. So that way the system is only going to associate those 20 people, or those, and it's going to schedule within that limit of 20 seats when it does its forecasting. Trying to think, I know I jumped into some of this stuff throughout the process while we were answering other questions. So I guess from this aspect, I mean, the agent itself, that My Zone field is available directly in the agent's interface for that. It's really not much different, but I could show that for you. If you guys would like to see what it would look like if the agent actually had their agent interface open and wanted to make changes to their schedule or request changes. I also have a little video that I was going to flash because it just takes about 30 seconds to let you know what that mobile app looks like. It's a little bit easier to do that than try and mirror my phone on my computer for you. But were there any other questions regarding what we've shown up to this point about the workforce management? I know we don't have some of those integration points you guys were asking about, but just from a general functionality, does it look like it would meet the needs outside of kind of the integration requests from what you guys would want to use it for?
I think so. It does. It does a lot of the stuff that we're doing manually today. And I mean, our current integration with ADP, our on-prem solution, isn't elegant. It's dropping CSV files and whatnot. So I think you can replicate that now, and we wouldn't be onboarding this year anyway. So you might have the direct integration up online before.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that payroll API is. It's going to allow you to do that. And the nice thing is when you create your activity codes, you'll actually be able to mark them as paid or non-paid.
That's
so
cool.
There's the payroll checkbox there. So is this associated to payroll or is it not? Is it a tradable activity? So will it let you trade the shifts? What ACD events is it linked to? You know, does it have an associated shift type or work hours? So you can go through, and when you create these nice little guys, you can, you know, there's that default length. You can choose priorities based on the schedule itself. Where does it fall in the schedule? Can this be set as a shift type? Is there a payroll code? And so forth. So you have your.
So Adam, are you thinking maybe that we'd be able to pull paid time out of this versus the existing time staff clocks?
Yeah. That maybe even integrate time off requests and things like that, so there's not so much switching back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have some time off rules in here. So you can even associate them based off of, you know, the scheduling unit itself, what activity code you want them to link to. Is it seniority based? So do they get so much time off based off of how long they've been here? Is there a percentage that's associated to that, or do they just get like a fixed amount based off of specific percentages and so on? So turn on carryover, and then you can actually go in and see kind of a summary of who has what left. Sick time. Looks like we don't take too much advantage of this in here, so looks like paid time off is about it, but
okay.
All right, so just so you guys can see what this looks like, because this is something that comes with the license, which is kind of nice. So this is what I was talking about, that app. So very similar. Nice thing here is they can actually see what days they're working for that whole week, go in, trade their shifts. They can view messages on whether it's been approved or not approved. and jump around, and it'll actually intelligently tell them who they can and can't trade shifts with by highlighting in green here in a second. So right there, I can see trade with agent available for those time slots. So that way they're not trying to trade with time slots and people that they can't. And they can mark if they want to give away the trade and who those available agents are. So lots of neat information, just so your agents don't have to log into the platform if they want to check their schedule or maintain or trade a shift or request a day off. They could just simply open up the app that links directly with the platform and do that all from right there.
And again,
just a nice little added bonus.
Their login credentials into that is really the same credentials that are inside the CX1.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Correct. Now we got about 6 minutes left. So if there's no other questions, I can pass things over to Aaron and let him kind of talk next steps with you guys and see where we want to go from here.
Yeah, I do have
So
one
were there
more
any?
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So as we have, again, the onboarding, it looks like right now, if we were to do it tomorrow, we'd have to set it up, the employee inside of Active Directory, ADP, but also inside of NICE would feed into the CX1. And then when we have an employee that leaves Midway USA, we'd kind of go through the same process, and that we'd have to disable them in these different software interfaces. So then
Correct.
that way when CX1, if I disable Megan because she's left, then basically on her phone, she would not be allowed to get logged into it anymore on that app.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And the nice thing about this being unified is I know you'd have to go between Active Directory and this, but that's it. Because if you deactivate them here, they're deactivated for the agent interface, for the mobile app, for workforce management, for any other aspect that they may have permissions to within CX1. So it would just be those two places.
Okay.
And you can import users in here as well. So, if you could export, say, that list from Active Directory, there's an import capability. So you wouldn't really have to add them in here individually. You would be able to import agents in bulk via our bulk upload portal.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
So, there's one, as we've kind of tried to say throughout this whole process, this product is all unified. So the things that we've kind of talked about before, whether it's coaching, whether it's workforce management, whether it's everything, it's all the same platform, so people don't have to jump out of it and jump into it and jump to something new. So we want to, preface and keep that, as a common theme here, because it just makes it easy. Whereas there are some solutions out there, vendors that you utilize, and you got to log into this, log out of that, and log into this, and you're never you don't know what's going on, in the background. So also another thing that we'd like to kind of make sure that people understand is that because it is all one product, one solution, everything, obviously there's always upgrades going on down the roads, as we kind of, manage things. And if you pull a lot of different pieces together and connect them together, and then when you upgrade one thing, it may break everything else. Whereas ours is once again unified, so we're kind of keeping that consistent. So just want to kind of preference that. That's it for today with the workforce management. Want to kind of get your feedback on what you guys thought about it, good or bad. I always love to hear the bad, because that kind of lets us know what we need to, report back up to leadership. We obviously like the good as well too, but the bad is definitely just as important. So just want to kind of get your feedback, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think this solves a lot of our pain points today. It'll be an ask to get it all set up, but then it makes life easier going forward. There'll be some duplication of effort across different platforms. I think it's kind of necessary just because it's a different solution versus where we have to set up employees elsewhere. But other than that, it looks like it meets most of our needs and fills in a few of our challenges as well.
Yeah. Great. What about Anyone else? Feedback?
Yeah, for me, the more that we can do integration on this, because right now, from an IS security perspective, I do, I think it's like now 5-way matching on employees of building security, Active Directory, ADP, phone system, and other areas. So basically I do a dump and I have a report out there that my staff go through to say, yep, this person's left. We got everything cleaned up. So that's kind of why I like all the integration points to reduce the number of systems that we have to put users into and change and take them out of.
Definitely understand that. So, okay. Anything else? That's about it. Well, perfect. What I guess that's kind of where we leave off of workforce management. What are next steps that you'd like to kind of see? Is it, other areas like coaching, for quality? Are there certain areas that you want to see? And I know you weren't looking to integrate anything obviously this year. Has anything changed on that aspect, and when you are looking to do integration of things?
Probably start Q3, Q4, 2023, I would think. We've seen pretty much everything now, so really I just need to start getting some ideas of pricing. I think we've talked about 2 different quotes. This would need to be included. We'd need this suite, obviously, so that it'd need to be included in all of them. But really, we just need to start getting an idea of pricing so that we can head towards a final decision on who we want to partner up with for this.
Right, definitely. Okay. So workforce management in the suite itself. Sam and Hope, do you think you have enough information to help with for us to be able to start to kind of get pricing, or at least the start of pricing to them? What information do we need?
I think we should have the basics, and I mean, we can tweak it, but also we need to get the pricing for expert, right? I think
for knowledge management solution.
Yeah, I'd like to see a quote with and without that, because that's definitely a nice to have, but not necessary for a straight replacement of what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. Well, then we will go ahead and get started on that, and then obviously a lot can change over that period of time, but we definitely can get you a quote, and we or at least kind of get started with that, and we can kind of move forward on the next steps after that. When did you want, once we get you back that pricing, we'll set up a time to kind of review it with you, and then we'll kind of go from there. Okay?
Yep. Sounds good.
Well, I appreciate it. If any of you guys have any other questions, feel free to ping me or reach out to me, and we appreciate your time today, and have a great weekend and holiday. Okay?
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.